Hello and welcome to our Sociology 1 video lecture at home. Hopefully you are enjoying your day. We are going to cover chapter 4 today, which is socialization and the life course. A few questions that may be asked during this chapter could be, what makes you who you are? So you, at this point in your life, probably have a good concept of yourself. And the questions that are addressed are things like, were you born the way you are? Or did your surroundings and your environment mostly contribute to who you are? Researchers call this concept the nature versus nurture argument. And most social scientists who've studied this usually agree that it is not just biology or just your environment that shapes you, but both, and to varying degrees. So that leads me to your first questions that I would like for you to respond to. I'll read you the questions and then you'll need to take a minute to press pause to respond to those questions. And you'll see that they are right there in your notes for the video lecture notes. Question number 1 is asking you to choose on a sliding scale between 0 and 100%. How much of your personality is shaped by your surroundings, so by your culture and your environment? And what percentage of your personality do you think is biological? So this is up to you. There's no right or wrong answer. Just based on what you think about yourself and assessing who you are, what percentage do you think is environmental and what percentage is biological? The second question is asking you, who or what do you think had the biggest or most significant impact on your socialization? So press pause, give yourself a moment to respond. Okay, moving on, we are going to start by defining socialization. Socialization is defined as the lifelong process in which people learn appropriate attitudes, values, and behavior. As always, I encourage you to find a few key words in that definition to help you to remember the term. One thing that really stands out to me is lifelong. So socialization doesn't end when you get your first job or when you graduate from high school. It is a lifelong process from the time that you are a newborn child, infant, to being elderly. We are socialized through interaction, and all of these things where you're learning these attitudes, behaviors, values, shape your self-image. Socialization is different, however, from personality, which is a person's typical patterns of attitudes, needs, characteristics, and behavior. One thing that stands out to me to help me to distinguish personality from socialization is that personality is a typical pattern. So it doesn't typically change dramatically throughout a person's life. So when you think about somebody who is shy, that is a part of their personality. Now, they may have a moment where they express themselves freely and they don't act shy, but overall, if a person is shy, you typically expect them to maintain that personality. Now, a person who has typically been a very outgoing, funny, kind of entertaining, animated person, that's their personality. They may have moments where they're not so animated, but typically those patterns stay with a person throughout their life, whereas socialization is a constant changing process. Okay, so in talking about personality, I thought it would be fun for you to take a personality quiz. A group of researchers have put together a quiz that scores you on the 5 dimensions of personality, which include, and you can see them on this left-hand column, extroversion, neuroticism, conscientiousness, agreeableness, and openness. So go ahead and press pause, direct yourself to this URL at the bottom of the screen, and take the quiz. It should take you about 5 minutes, and don't forget to record the results for points in your notes. All right, and I'm looking forward to hearing the results of your personality quizzes when we come back to class. So moving on, how important is socialization to your growth as a child? Many of you may be familiar with the movie Nell. If you take a look at this top right hand corner, that is a movie that stars Jodie Foster, came out in 1994. It was about a young woman raised hidden from birth by her mother in a backwoods cabin. She was raised without normal human contact, so in the movie, if you've seen it, you'll see that she crouches like an animal, she screams wildly, she sings and speaks her own language. And actually the movie was drawn from a real-life account of a 16-year-old boy who appeared rather mysteriously in 1828 in some town square in Nuremberg, Germany. However, there isn't very much documentation on his progress. On the other hand, there are two very well-known cases that sociologists and psychologists cite most often in textbooks, and those are the cases of Isabel and Jeannie. Isabel was a little girl who was found at the age of 6 years old. She was isolated and locked in a dark room for most of her life. She was unable to speak when she was found or hear, and the reason she was locked away is because Isabel's mother's parents, so Isabel's grandparents, were very, very ashamed of the fact that Isabel was born to their daughter, an illegitimate child. When she was discovered at the age of 6, she couldn't speak. She made croaking sounds, and her only communication with her mother were hand gestures. So she was basically deprived of these interactions and socializations that most children experience during their childhood. She had seen few people, so she was afraid of strangers, and she almost acted like an animal when she was confronted with somebody she was unfamiliar with. This is just a base of what she'd become accustomed to. When she was tested on maturity, she scored at the level of an infant rather than a 6-year-old. So at that time, specialists put her through a training program. They helped her adapt to human relationships. And after a few days of training, she actually made her first attempt to verbalize. So she started slowly, but then quickly she passed through 6 years of development. In a little over 2 months, she was speaking in complete sentences. 9 months later, she could identify words and sentences, and then by the time she reached age 9, she was actually ready to attend school with other children. At age 14, she was in 6th grade and doing well and emotionally well-adjusted. All right, so another case, and possibly more well-known, would be the case of Jeannie, and this is a picture of her right here. So Isabel's case, she was discovered in 1938. Jeannie was discovered in 1970, and her case was a little bit different because she was held in isolation, also by her parents, in a dark room where she was basically chained to a toilet from the age of 20 months, and then she was discovered just under the age of 14 years old. So her isolation was much longer, and during those years she didn't have any family members interact or speak with her. She couldn't hear anything other than swearing. She had a very violent home that she lived in. There was no television or radio in her home, and she had never heard the sounds of normal human speech. 1 year after extensive therapy, unlike Isabel, Jeannie's grammar resembled that of an 18-month-old. She made further advances when she did continue through therapy, but she didn't ever fully achieve the language ability. She was never fully able to speak. And even today, she's in her late 50s, and she's living in a home for developmentally disabled adults. This next slide shows a sketch that she drew when she was 18, which just is an attest to her inability to fully develop due to her isolation. So both of these experiences are important to researchers because it's not so often that you find cases of such extreme isolation, and obviously it would be unethical to isolate any child to determine whether or not that is a huge determiner in one's ability to acquire language and interact with people normally. So these are just a couple cases that really emphasize that interaction is definitely essential to the shaping of development. I do want to mention when we return to class, we will be watching a video about Jeannie, so you can really get a little bit more insight as to what she was like when they first discovered her. And one last research that's cited in your textbook is very well known. It's known as Harlow's monkeys, and if you take a look here, you can see a little side-by-side shot of this little monkey, and on the right-hand side you can see that he's hugging and clinging to a cloth-covered wire monkey, and then on the left you have a wire monkey that is not covered in cloth. And basically this was a study conducted at the University of Wisconsin, and the purpose was to see what were the effects of isolating monkeys. These are rhesus monkeys, and basically what they did was they kept the monkeys isolated from other monkeys. They were never able to interact with their real mothers, and they were given artificial mothers. And they gave, on the left, the wire artificial mother the bottle with which the baby monkey can receive its physiological nourishment. So it would use the wire monkey for feeding. And then on the right, they covered it with cloth, and they found that the baby monkeys preferred the cloth over the milk. So they would go over to the wire monkey to feed themselves, but then they would go back and cling to the cloth monkey for most of the time because they needed that sort of nurturing warmth that they got from the worm monkey. As adults, he found that these monkeys that were raised in isolation were unable to mate successfully. They were unable to interact with other monkeys their age. They were abusive when they gave birth. So if they were a mother, they were abusive mothers. And all of this also attests to the damaging results of isolation during even a primate's upbringing. Okay, so this will conclude your first part of your video lecture, and you will have part 2, which will pick up exactly where we left off, which you can locate on your eCourse newsfeed, or you can locate the URL in the same place for the YouTube version of it.